Hello everyone, it's time for the Purple Robe Song Series, and the theme for today is a song that can get me through a hard time. And the song I have chosen is Roland Carter's arrangement of Lift Every Voice and Sing, also known in the Black community as the Black National Anthem. Now this is a song I grew up with and have always loved, and I particularly love Roland's arrangement of it. I think it is so exquisite. But it is the profound lyrics that so eloquently explain the beauty and the trials and tribulations of the Black American and the hope for the future. Now, because I was singing the Black National Anthem, I thought I would just ask some of my Black opera singing friends to come sing it with me. And they so graciously gave of their time and their voices and their talent. And I'm so grateful. I thank each and every one of them. I wish I could have had more. But since I called on them, you are in for a treat. I have some of the best opera singers that have ever graced any stage. I have legends, current stars, and upcoming stars. So I'm going to take off my purple robe and I'm going to join them in the chorus. So I hope you enjoy. The Purple Robe Song Series presents Lift Every Voice and Sing.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jacinta Green, and I am a student studying graphic design at Mott Community College. Thank you for joining us tonight. Our event, chronicling the African American struggle, resilience, and perseverance, is brought to you by Mott Community College with support from the Ballinger Trust. Tonight's presentation is one of several activities and events that have been held at MCC over the course of February in honor of Black History Month. These efforts reflect the college commitment to modeling diversity, equity, and inclusion in our programming and services. I am honored to welcome you all this evening and to introduce our very special guest, artist Ted Ellis. Ted Ellis is an American artist and former environmental chemist. Mr. Ellis is best known for his African-American themed art in styles which blend elements of folk art, naturalism, and impressionism. His personal rendition of Barack Obama in acrylic, Obama, the 44th President, was presented in honor of the 2009 presidential inauguration. Mr. Ellis is the first African-American artist to be appointed to a federal commission. The 400 Years of African-American History Commission, established by the United States Department of the Interior, is responsible for planning and creating programs that will recognize and advance the historical and cultural contributions of African Americans since the year 1619. The official federal logo and seal, as well as the 400th Distinguished Service Award, was created by Mr. Ellis. Each will become part of the U.S. National Archives. Mr. Ellis's extensive artistic talents have also provided him the opportunity to be appointed as scholar in residence at Old Dominion University. His art business has sold more than 1.75 million fine art products, and he works with a number of prominent corporations. He is also known for his community work, especially advancing arts and children's education. Please join me in welcoming artist Ted Ellis.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for that great introduction. It's always so hard hearing stuff about yourself and say, is that me? This is a wonderful opportunity, you know, to have this moment to speak about my relevance as an artist, to speak about my history, my culture, the African-American experience and lifestyle. I have been a professional artist close to 30 years now, you know, with the intentions to tell a story. Yeah, I think about when I, you know, decided to pick up the paintbrush and make it a business full time. What would that be? What would that look like? And early on, I said, you know, I have to be true to myself. I have to, you know, understand that my passion is what's going to drive me. And at the end of the day, that I have enough purpose with my passion that I could do something significant. I could say something that's important, and it would speak through my art. So I think I've done some of those things in my journey. I think this is indicative of it. When we talk about chronicling the African-American struggle, the resiliency, the perseverance, and triumph, you know, since 1619 until now. So it's the culmination of over a 400-year journey of us sustaining, holding fast to who we are and where we came from. It's something to be said, you know, separated by language and geography, taken from your birthplace, and to say that tomorrow's is going to be a better day. I currently work as a federal commissioner for the 400 Years of African American History Commission. I'm vice chair of that, and I'm proud to wear that hat because its intent and purpose is to recognize the importance of our contributions over 400 years, starting with 1619. But we've been here a lot longer than that in the United States and throughout the world. This exhibition, if we can have the first slide. There's that wonderful bird, Sankofa, you know, to fetch, to go back and claim your history so that you would have a beginning point, a starting point, to know where you need to go at in the future. The second slide, my ancestral tree. And I always try to have some messaging in each one of my paintings, but the strength of this tree, the roots, our contributions to the making of America. I have in this painting 20 hidden figures, and those figures represent the 20 or so enslaved Africans that arrived in Point Comfort, Virginia. From good roots come good fruits, and pushing forward from the arc of 1619 to right now to 47 million African Americans on the continent of America in the United States. We have impacted and done so much over a relatively short period of time. A lot of that under duress. Next slide. The journey 1 and the journey 2, as I mentioned earlier in my conversation, when I did the journey, it was to have a summation of an exhibition I had in 2015. It was close to about 90 paintings at Houston Community College. And that one painting, from the slave ship to the cotton field, to the boardroom, to the President of the United States, to the US Capitol, you know, our journey, you know, one of struggle, one of resiliency, one of perseverance, one of triumph. And I was speaking to the audience, to the students, because we were up close in this space. And I just thought I did a very good job. And one of the students raised their hand and says, well, she says, well, where am I at in that story? And I said, oh my goodness, okay. I said, give me a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, and before the exhibition is over with, I'm gonna have the female version of the journey. And in that, there's a little bit more in that. It speaks from slavery to the cotton field, to the boardroom, to the presidency of the White House. But in her journey, she's carrying her child, and she has the Bible. And it's so indicative of the strength of women, African-American women, that it captured that. So these two pieces of the Genesis, for the most part, almost the Alpha and Omega, although there's a continuation of that story to be told. Next slide. That piece is the 20 or so enslaved Africans that arrived on the White Lion ship that ported in Point Comfort, Virginia in 1619. And if you can see, I have each one of the Africans lined up. They're enchained, and in the middle, there's the shape of Africa behind those enslaved. It's in red, showing the blood sacrifice, the loss, and pouring over the boat are the souls that were lost through the Middle Passages. I also, to the far right side of it, you see at the on the left hand, the right side of it is the door of no return at Ghana, and then passing forward from 1619, 1705 were the Virginia Black Codes that were very intentional on how do you treat your property that you considered not equal to you in that regards. Next slide. And here is on the auction block. I have the shape of the United States outline showing the actualization and slavery throughout the United States. I also have the Willie Lynch papers embedded inside that painting on how to make a slave. And you think about the importance of family and the structure of the family being torn apart. 15 official slave states, which I identified, plus the District of Columbia, that participated in the system of slavery, of chattel. We were not, African Americans were not recognized. Africans those enslaved were not recognized as human beings, but as property. You know, how were we able to endure and hold on? A lot of that sustained us was our history as Africans and the strength of our ancestors. Next slide. And I think this is one of my most powerful pieces as it relates to slavery. Sugar, cotton, tobacco, rice. I would always say this in my presentation were the core areas that drove the global commerce of slavery. And one of my my fellow colleagues says, Ted, you don't forget the chattel, that individual in the middle. 5 of the major commodities that drove the global commerce of slavery. In the painting, you see it's sort of bleeding, the pain, sweat, and tears that were sacrificed during slavery, that period of being oppressed. At the base of capitalism was free labor, which I tried to illustrate in the painting. Above the head of the enslaved is an outline of the continent of Africa, that the kings sold their brothers and sisters into slavery. And as that slave looks outward, juxtaposed against the slave is the Statue of Liberty that represented freedom. The different bill notes, 2 in particular, the one of George Washington, the dollar bill, and Abraham Lincoln. George Washington was a slave owner, but his will, his living will, when he died, asked that all of his slaves be set free. Abraham Lincoln, who ushered in the Emancipation Proclamation to free the slaves and to end slavery, was very intentional with that. In 1863, 2 years later, in 1865, General Gordon Granger made his trip to Galveston, Texas, to say cease and desist under Executive Order General Number 3, that slavery is over with. The other bill notes, if you can see, represent the different countries that were engaged in slavery: the Portuguese, the Dutch, the French, the Spanish, the English, were all part of this national conglomeration of building their countries off of the backs of those who were enslaved. Next slide. And this particular piece were the 3 individuals that escaped to freedom in Virginia, in Norfolk, Virginia. They made their way to the Freedom Fortress, which is known as Fort Monroe. And there, General Benjamin Butler received those 3 enslaved Africans and considered them contraband of war, which was an exercise in itself that if one or the other on each side were able to extract the goods of the other, it would be called contraband. And so it was a way to give freedom to those who were enslaved at Fort Monroe, who found themselves to Freedom Fortress. And over a period of 3 to 6 months, you had over 6,000 enslaved finding their freedom at Fort Monroe, Freedom Fortress. The contraband war from there had the contraband camps that you had school teachers to come out of in the state of Virginia. Mary S. Peake was one of them. William Corney was a Union African-American soldier who fought, who also received the Medal of Honor. That was 1860, which became the precursor to the Emancipation Proclamation that was ushered in by President Abraham Lincoln. Next slide. This is my Free at Last. It's my official Juneteenth painting that was recognized for the 150th anniversary of Juneteenth in 2015 from the city of Galveston, Texas, as well as the state of Texas, and eventually found its way on the House and the Senate side in Washington, D.C. There's a lot to be said in this painting. The individual who was enslaved, head held high, tear in eye, showing allegiance still to country, the broken shackles, illustrating freedom, 1865, that year when Gordon Granger went down to Galveston, Texas, and ushered Executive Order number 3. The matriarch with the child telling that story, that history, that is so important, preserving that culture. The tapestry of the quilt that continues to be woven. The functional family unit held intact, holding hands on the porch, right there with head bowed. Behind them is embedded in the house is the Emancipation Proclamation. Above on the rooftop are the free colored troops standing vigilant, looking forward. Behind the enslaved is Frederick Douglass, the great orator, speaking and talking to those in celebration of their freedom at the table, the Juneteenth table. And beyond that, you have Tubman pointing to the North Star, this way forward, which you can't see right now, but at the far back, there are 3 crosses showing their spirituality, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The oak tree that's bare because so much has been shed, but still strong, still vibrant, holding together. The roots that run deep, signifying our connection to this country, of giving and being there so much. And how under duress, we found the ingenuity to understand the significance of the drum, of how we communicated from plantation to plantation, and how we spoke when we couldn't speak. Free at last, free at last. Next slide. And it all started here for the 200th anniversary of Treme, the first community of free people of color in the United States. I created this piece to pay homage to that. And the mother of our culture is nurturing and holding the African American Museum that is the treasure chest of our culture, our history, and our heritage. The colorful houses representing that tapestry of potential first African American doctors, lawyers, bricklayers, engineers that come out of the first community free people of color in the continental United States. And we all know that, that is the birthplace of jazz, and that is also my birthplace, New Orleans. Next slide. How about that? That little old Southern white church, that you see throughout the whole Bible Belt and even other places. It sustained us, it revived us, it gave us our spiritual nutrition to keep us strong, to keep us vital. It's where we gathered, it's where we planned, it's where we learned. And it is still that house, that holy house, that we kneel and we bow to and we pray to our God that has carried us and held us close through bondage till we saw freedom. That's Sunday worship. Next slide. Plessy versus Ferguson, that happened in New Orleans close to, almost 100 years prior to Rosa Parks sitting down and changing the course of history in Montgomery, Alabama. Mr. Plessy challenged the laws of segregation in New Orleans. That's when he sat down on the streetcar, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court justice. But they ruled that separate was equal. And that simply destroyed that period of Reconstruction, of all that building where we saw the most of achievement throughout the political process in the United States. We had more congressmen and senators in the House of Government at the federal level than any other time. Judge Harlingen was the the Supreme Court justice that was presiding over that case. We know that they had the Great Compromise in 1877. That was when Andrew Jackson decided to remove all the federal troops from the southern states and let these Southerners rule and create policies and laws that would influence the good old days of keeping the oppressed and those who were out of bondage, who had found freedom, challenged with the same oppression that they faced when they were enslaved. Next slide. And so the progression of slavery through Reconstruction, through Jim Crow, until the civil rights. And we know that period lasted close to 15 years when Martin Luther King Jr., when Mr. Good Trouble, John Conyers, who was equally committed as Dr. King on every face of action in opposing social and civil injustice that African Americans and people of color face. You know, definitely when we think about Bloody Sunday, in March in 1965, when they decided to march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, a 57-mile march that took them 3 days to make that march. If anybody could tell me why they chose that Edmund Pettus Bridge to make a statement, to make a national, global statement against the social unrest, the civil injustice that African Americans were faced at that time, that they were up against the local police force, the state troopers, and had at some point the federal troopers who had to come in. But Edmund Pettus, that bridge, that still edification, that name represented a Ku Klux Klan, a Grand Wizard. And so if Martin Luther King and John Lewis and those that dared to step up against racism and break that barrier, this was the reason why the Edmund Pettus Bridge was chosen to make that statement. And subsequently, the efforts of that put enough pressure on the federal government and those in control to sign the Fair Housing Act of 1968 that gave us the ability to own a house in the face of discriminatory practices, that finally says that there's some wealth and there's some security and a means of protection for our family. And then we think about the students who campaigned throughout the South and throughout the country to face scrutiny under the gun. When they called in the National Guards on several campuses throughout the United States, Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and Greensboro, North Carolina, where they had to sit in, where students says, we're gonna have a nonviolent protest. We have the strength and the reserve enough and the courage and the capacity collectively to stand up and sit down against injustice throughout the United States. Greensboro, North Carolina, at that woolwork. When we think about the Freedom Rides, when that started very early in 1946 with James Former and the planners of civil rights activities, when CORE was involved. It failed then, but they picked that same effort up with SNCC, the young students, and they took that voyage, that ride from Washington, D.C., all the way down to Anniston, Alabama, made their way to New Orleans to protest that they should have the same rights as any other individuals or citizens of the United States to be treated equally. Next slide. And this particular painting, this was my summation and trilogy of the civil rights struggle. I Am a Man, Equal Rights for All, One Man, One Vote. And we know about the sanitation workers in Memphis when they were fighting for equitable pay. We know early on with the suffrage movement when women were asking for the right to vote. And how we have bled, we have suffered, we have died to be able to have that opportunity to vote. One man, one vote. How critical and significant that is in making the kind of change that is constructive, that is beneficial to all citizens of America. I Am a Man, Equal Rights for All, One Man, One Vote. I had the distinct pleasure of debuting this at the Congressional Black Caucus in Washington, D.C., when I had each one of the congressmen and politicians to come by and share their stories. And I realized, you know, the power, the real power of art and how it impacted. And I saw these historical individuals, you know, come by my booth while I was selling my art to see that it was more than just selling art, that it had a message, an important message. Just recently, this past November, AARP magazine put out a publication of Black Voices, and it was the conversation of those distinguished individuals over a period of time that were fighting the ills of injustice, of racial injustice. And they decided to take art and marry the art to the words. And I was one of those artists. And the measurable thing about this is how significant it is that AARP has the largest publication in the world, over 40 million subscribers. So that art had a chance and opportunity to impact millions. And so when we look at the power of art and images, they carry a certain weight that it speaks to all of us at every juncture of our livelihood, to every part of our understanding and education. And if not, it does beg the question to ask the question, what is happening? What is going on? So the power of visual art is very stimulating and very informing. Next slide. And as we push forward and we move forward, that was May the 25th, 2020. On that day, George Floyd lost his life because a policeman put his knee on his neck and suffocated him, and he died. And this was millions of folks got a chance to see the inhumane treatment, the brutality of the police department. Moments in time that African Americans had been crying and saying that we're being ill-treated, mistreated, we're being abused under the protection, supposed to be the protection of the law, a level of brutality, a level of mistrust by a body that's supposed to serve and protect us, but has acted as an instrument of fear. I decided to speak like many of my artists of the past have during the civil rights movement, the Black arts movement, when Amari Baraka was very intentional in his activism to galvanize the poets and the visual artists to speak to the atrocities that we were facing as African Americans, as Negroes, as Blacks in America. You know, we can't breathe. Blacks' lives matter. Justice for George. Racism is a pandemic too, and racism has always been a pandemic. It has been the Achilles heel for America, and it's something that's very corrosive and dangerous. And we have to understand that has to end. and we're responsible for making that income. Next slide. Wow, our 44th President of the United States. I had the distinct pleasure and opportunity when I created that painting to have it showcased at one of the inaugural ceremonies in Washington, D.C. at the French Embassy. And when I think about his duration as president, his accomplishment, particularly with healthcare and knowing the levels of healthcare disparity in the United States, and when we talk about, civil apartheid and you can and economic apartheid and racial apartheid, there's medical apartheid, and to have the opportunity for every citizen to have affordable health care is immeasurable. And it's a piece of his legacy that he will always, and we can always look back on and say that was beneficial to the entirety of the citizens of the United States. The many colors, capturing that, representing the different ethnicities, the amalgamation, the color, the rainbow, the tapestry of America. I wanted to capture that in that painting. I thought the stoicism, the majesty in the image was important. The dignity, the pride, the intelligence that I wanted to project. I want to be. I'm always trying to be very careful in what I paint, because my paintings has the potential to last forever. Not just a day or a year, 100 years, but millennials, but a millennia and beyond. And so I just wanted to pay my respects to an individual, an African-American male who reached the highest office of the land in America. Next slide. Our struggle continues. Colin Kaepernick, a celebrated superstar. He was the starting quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. In his illustrious career, he decided to pause, and he made tremendous amount of money, but something was bothering him. Something wasn't right. He saw, he heard, he read, he saw the brutality of Black men and women and children being brutalized, being killed by the police, and said enough is enough. And he decided to take that knee. He took that risk, that chance. National television, while a national anthem was played, to remind us, where is our truth? Where is our dignity? Where is our humanity? It took a tremendous amount of courage for this young man to give up so much that he worked so hard for. But there was something within him that says that I have to speak. The same way my ancestors spoke and said that tomorrow has to be a better day. Separated by language and geography, they got off that slave ship and said, for the future, tomorrow will be a better day. No matter what I'm faced with, I will accept that challenge. I will make that sacrifice. And in this painting, if it was large enough, you will see there's a plethora of imagery that I have in there. I have us going to the voting booth. I have when the Olympians stood fast in receiving their gold and silver medal, raising their hands in protest, asking to be treated equal. I have the current unrest in Baltimore, where I show the police engaged, militarized in a sense against those who had been oppressed in that city. And in his wear, I have these chains that he's still shackled to this day, still fighting for equity, still fighting for freedom and justice. That's Colin Kaepernick. Next slide. And when we look at the opportunity and the fight for justice and the fight for change and the significance of culture and how culture impacts our policies and laws, I thought it was very interesting that I had to do a painting of the Rumors of War. That's a real statue that's in Richmond, Virginia, which is the state capital of Virginia, which Virginia has always been a policy state, the precursor to Washington, D.C. Several of our founding fathers found themselves living and planning in the state of Virginia. And did you know that the Daughters of Confederate headquarters is in Richmond, Virginia, the state capital? And the Daughters of Confederate sponsored a lot of the Southern monuments that are images of oppressions. If you were an African American, you would question why. And then did you know that the national parks, in partnership with the Department of Interior, that's responsible for land resources and cultural heritage, provided a means to take care of those monuments? So when we look at the systemic issues of racism and policies and laws, we have to look at the government as well. Because we know in 1865, when President Andrew Jackson, when Congress was out of session, they were repealing and rolling back all the gains that were made during Reconstruction, to the fact that the Republican Thaddeus Stevens and several other Republicans ushered in the civil rights bills, the 13th Amendment, the ratification of the 13th Amendment, 14th and 15th Amendment, to fight against the injustices that were weighing down those who were enslaved right out of slavery. So when you look at the level of incarceration, when we look at vagrancy laws and pig laws and the peonage laws that work through the state, through the county, it was very intentional that these southern states were focused on the good old days, on creating something that they had lost during the Civil War, when slavery drove the economy, particularly of the South. And the industry of slavery on the manufacturing side benefited those of the North. That was industrialized. So it is paramount that we understand that culture is a precursor to what is being laid down through the policies and the laws. It's what you have in common. If we don't have that opportunity to speak to our position of value and importance, our communities, it never happens. We have the next slide here, and it's our 5 queens. And I will tell you, I don't think enough has been said about that, and the image and the impact of that. These 5 queens, when we talk about these beauty pageants, were all women of color. When we talk about the standard of beauty, the standard of grace, the standard of intelligence, is all reflected in these women of color who won these pageants that represent women internationally. It is a profound and historical statement, and incredulous. Even if you had the opportunity to listen and hear their stories, how they were able to just easily, effectively articulate their purpose and their passion. These women of color, our 5 queens. Next slide. And how about that? When you're talking about, breaking barriers, when you're talking about in that struggle and making change, Madam Vice President Kamala Harris, the first Vice President of the United States of America. We the people, in order to make a better future. And I just thought about that tear in the eye, of the struggle, of the continued struggle, the pandemic of racism that we face for so long, the pandemic of COVID right now, and still have to deal with the ill effects of racism. It's reprehensible, and it's almost unimaginable that still to this day in the 21st century. But there's hope. And in that, what I said earlier about the struggle, about the resiliency, about the perseverance, and above more than anything else, the triumph of tomorrow will be a better day, not only for African Americans, but for all of us to heal through this trauma. Next slide. And she's just a wonderful example of staying in the fight, of being courageous. Stacey Abrams lost the governor's race of Georgia, but that didn't deter her. She didn't decide to quit. Matter of fact, even before that, she was championing the fight of the oppressors. She was fighting voter suppression in the state of Georgia. The fact of the matter, she was able to change minds and actions. She was able to get people to the poll. Millions of new registered voters went to the poll. And what happened out of that action? What happened out of the faith to believe, to say that one person could make a change, that it can happen? A state that was notoriously red was turned blue. And you had the first African American in the state of Georgia as a senator, which would not have happened if not for Stacey Abrams. And she also turned the tide of the presidential election, with having Georgia being a blue state and the electorals going to President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. That is Stacey Abrams giving us and living the example that one person can make a difference. One person, all of us matters. Next slide. And this is one of my fondest pieces because it's so much of Sankofa, go back and fetch, know your history so you can move forward. So much about the past history, so much about the importance of education, hope and promise, and the future. As we look toward the future, as we look toward improving human capital and human worth, education and history plays a vital role in that. The back, the spine, at the very core is a slave ship that represents the past. A past that we didn't choose as Africans, that we were forced here, taken away from our home, but not denying the importance, the historical importance of our history, of our culture, that was laid and established long before we became enslaved, long before 1619, that we carried our culture and our history from West Africa through the transatlantic slave trade. And we kept that, and we improved our value and our worth with improving our knowledge, our new knowledge, and writing a new history forward and seeing a new future of promise. Well, I said earlier, separated by language and geography, that tomorrow will be a better day, that our future will be bright. I think of Harriet Tubman, I think of Shirley Chisholm, the first African-American woman to run for president of the United States. I think about our new Vice President Kamala Harris. I think about Stacey Abrams. I think about the strength of our community. I think about the role that African-American women played in being the backbone and the strength of our community. understanding the importance and the significance that our culture is important. I think about Carter G. Woodson, the father of Black history. And in February, when he created Black History Week, and what he was trying to say that our story is not just an African-American story. It is one of American history. And we matter and we contribute to the fabric of America. The next slide. And in closure, we talk about, policies and guiding principles that get us here, that affect our livelihood and our station in life. It's so critical and so important. The last image is the road to success. And it's one of diversity and one of inclusion and one of forward progress and action. The signal light, which you can't see in its entirety, it's a green light, and it's time for go. And the signs for the street is progress and diversity. They've crossed the intersection, and there are those who are waiting to move forward as well. And the gentleman who's sitting there reading the paper, reading the history, who was prior to it involved in the struggle for constructive change, laying the pathway so that our journey will continue for equity, for equality, and for promise. What I've tried to attempt in the body of my work is to show where we have been historically and the movement moving forward to a greater place and time, so that we can execute on that promise of reaching the mountaintop together. So that we understand that our struggle is a united struggle, and that our cause is just in education, and that we are responsible to others, to our communities, to build better communities, to be responsible, to take that seat or that knee when we see injustice, to stand firm and to stand strong for the truth, because that's what matters for our children and for our future. I have 2 young adults that I am thankful God has blessed me with. And what I want to be able to do is sow into them and leave a legacy that they can build upon, that they can leverage, and that they can use. And I am so thankful that I have been able to absorb what I love doing, my passion, and be purpose in it. And I'm so thankful that it does not happen in a vacuum by itself, that I've been afforded the opportunity by the family of Mott Community College to be part of your intentionality, your mission of enlightenment, of education, of reaching and giving back, of building something that will be sustainable, that we can live. We can live in a kind of harmony that human beings ought to. We're not a young society. I mean, we go back over 200,000 years, but we're challenging that space in 200,000 years to be better, to do better, to move away from the hunters and gatherers, to cultivate, to become farmers, to become planners, to do the kind of good construction that's necessary so that we do well. We're still evolving. We're still learning. And we are in that journey together, all of us, every ethnic group. If we can just remove the color and just see folks, my dad said, well, we all bleed red. I mean, come on now. I mean, we all human beings. We eat and sleep and we dance and we have fun and we laugh. Think about if we can move the constructs and the confines of racism. Think about when we was just kids and we didn't see color and we just hugged and we laughed and we played. But that learned behavior of racism is corrosive. It is a cancer. And it keeps us from enjoying each other, enjoying the gifts that we have. We sort of kind of find our way with the song and dance and culinary and the food. We know that if we go out universally, we know music makes us feel good, different kinds of music. And we know definitely food warms our stomach and our hearts. And it gives us a kind of trust. And it's where we need to be at the end of the day. And as educators and administrators, we play a decisive role in that. And just to be mindful of it. So in my chanced opportunities, as a gypsy on my magic carpet, it gives me the opportunity to engage. I never know sometimes where my magic carpet is going to take me, but I do know that I have passion and I have purpose with it. And so I get on that magic carpet and I enjoy the ride. And I do want to make a difference like you guys. So I want to pause for a minute. I want to open the floor up to questions, to thoughts, and to ideas, so that we can all leave here with something to give to others that will improve their livelihood. So I'll pause for a minute, just for 1 minute, and entertain questions.
So thank you very much, Mr. Ellis, for another powerful presentation today. For those that don't know, Mr. Ellis has graced us with his presence all day. He started with our students, then moved on with our employees, and now is talking with the community members. So we say thank you. We're just so happy to hear your story more and to hear about the artistry that you have brought into this world and this society that is really helping us to move forward as a society. If you have questions, please, if we could flash that on the screen now, there we go. It looks like it's mcchr@mcc.edu, mcchr@mcc.edu. So I'm going to begin with a question to start us off. And you have such a passion and such a joy that is so infectious. And I want to know, how do you keep that joy when you're telling stories that could often be thought of as sorrowful and could actually make you have anger? How do you do that?
Dr. Beverly, that's a great question. My epiphany came when I was at the Congressional Black Caucus, and I had my trilogy, I Am a Man, Equal Rights for All, One Man, One Vote. And when the politicians, all of them came around me, I says, I got it, because I was, I struggle with the slavery thing, and I have, because it makes you so angry. Why? For what reason? And I thought about cup half full versus half empty. Out of slavery came doctors, came lawyers, came scientists, came engineers. I mean, a plethora of good out of struggle, out of duress. We had more patent inventions during oppression than any other time during the course of history. So that level of ingenuity came out of that. And there's one other thing. I had an exhibition a long time ago. I was 30 pounds lighter and looked like a little high school kid. And Jason, it was at the Irving Art Center in Irving, Texas. And I had a whole bunch of artwork, man. And I could stay up 72 hours easy. And they had an older couple walking in front of me. And this body of work, the Irving Art Center was a new facility. And they decided to have my art there. And so the older couple, they ran up, they were walking in, and everybody ran up to him and said, "That's Mr. Ellis." Well, I was right behind them, and I was this little old cat, that had painted all this art about our history in the Irving Art Center. And what I'm coming up to is that when I got there, Fletcher Yates and Jenny Yates had sponsored it. Bless Fletcher's heart, he's deceased now. But they took to me like I was their son. And they were board members of the Irving Arts Center. And they says, we're gonna give you an opportunity to speak through your art. And the curators, just like I'm doing my presentation here, we're in person. And she says, whatever you have in you is something special. She says, please don't let anybody steal your joy. My message to you is don't let anybody steal your joy. Things are gonna be said to you, things are gonna be done to you. But you know, God has given you a gift inside of you, you know, that shields you like armor. And it's your passion. And when you find yourself and when you want to give yourself to others, then it just happens miraculously, man. You just have the power. And when I tell you a 30-year journey, and I've watched a lot of things happen, I've said, why didn't this happen to me? I've been doing this for so long. I've been doing it before those others. I've been saying this and saying that. And it could easily creep in and says, you know, I could get angry and bitter. But I says, you know, I got to keep my joy. I got to enjoy my journey. And for all of us, that's what we have to do. You can't let anybody steal your joy. You have to enjoy your journey. And it's what my mom has done. You know, I watched my dad do it. I watched my neighbors do it. I watched this poor community in the lower Ninth Ward of New Orleans had nothing but had everything because they had care and they had love and they shared. So I never knew I was poor. You know, my parents' combined income when I was going to college was less than $15,000. And when I said that to the folks at the university, say that again. I said yeah. I didn't know no better. But the love was priceless. And that infectious spirit that you say I have and that I project, other people buy into it. And they support you in that endeavor. Dr. Beverly been watching me for I don't know how long. You know, I told my wife, I said, bitch, she said that whenever she was at Essence Festival, she would come look for me. And there were times when I said, I ain't doing Essence Festival no more. I said, they don't even appreciate me. And so when she called me up some weeks ago and she says, you know, Ted, I've been following you. You know, I've been following you for a long time. You know, Houston Community College, I had my exhibition there, you know, being scholar in residence in my exhibition at Old Dominion University. And she didn't have to say anything else. I had melted in inside. Whatever her request was, it was just a done deal right then and there. And so everybody's journey, everybody DNA is a little bit different. She was a dean then, she's a president now. And when we do the good works, I'm a chemist by profession. As an environmental chemist, I worked 8 years before I decided to pursue my passion as a full-time artist. And in the laboratory, when you're working on a solution in a chemical equation, there's A and B, and you look for that product C. Then more than likely, in that chemical equation, there's a byproduct D that you didn't expect that's better than what you were looking for. This opportunity in my journey was better than what I was looking for. And so when you're in that joy, you know, when you're in your passion, when you have the intentions to do the right thing, not only for yourself, for others, and it's a struggle when you're in that moment, when you're on your way. You never know if you're gonna get there. But I tell you, I always talk about this, you know, there's the good side of capitalism and the bad side of capitalism. The good side of capitalism is when you take that wealth and you start doing good. The better side of the good side of capitalism is when you do it when you're building, not till you amass it and you have the conscience to say, now I need to do goodwill. Do it while you're building. And we have the construct of being better along the journey collectively because we don't live in a vacuum. And so So I have taken that, I have owned that, and I try to be an example in the exercise of that, in the actions of it. I know that was a long answer, but I'm sorry.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, we have another question that's come in, and I wanted to make sure people saw that we had given you the wrong email address for it. It's actually questions@mcc.edu, questions@mcc.edu. So we have a question is, what is the canvas used for Our Time Has Come, the George Floyd piece? The person says that I'm just drawn to that.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much. Because I did not speak to that at all. So that canvas, if John Otterbridge was a brilliant artist in Los Angeles. He was in charge of Watts Tower. He was an educator, administrator, just was a brilliant activist and so forth. But he believed in throwaways, that throwaways had value, you know, lost objects. Now, he influenced a lot of artists, you know, and found objects and collages. And I would say he's one of the very first in taking those things that we typically throw away, we typically discard, we find no usage in it. But there's value in everything. There's value in that homeless person that we see walking there. If we spend time to reconstruct, to project on. You can project on and make change. You know, it's what a person think it, what a man think it, what a woman think it to break through. I don't know if you guys, I'm getting off on a tangent, the Iceman. He went up to Mount Everest in boots and no shirt. I mean, in freezing water. He's not had a cold or disease, only the way he's conditioned his mind. He's 60, I think 61 years of age, has a body of a 30-year-old. Mr. Wolfruff, I may be pronouncing his name, but you can Google him. It's wood, it's discarded wood. So when we think about communities, you think about that fence that provide that protection for your family. You know, that old wooden fence, you know, splintered and broken, but held together as a unit, So my choice of canvas was this old wood, this old weathered fence wood that represents so much of where we've been in our journey. You know, a homogenous unit to stick together, you know, been violated, but holding fast. And you see through the wood as a unit, the beauty and the power in that. So my whole series on my social justice and social activism have been done on these splintered boards that are put together. You visit my website under the social justice section. I mean, you'll see it. You'll see, you know, the ballot box, and you'll see the unity, you know, the individualism, but as a unit. You know, separate but united, and a metaphor and the symbolism in that is that it's been through storms. You know, it's been blown by the wind, it's been weathered by the rain, but it's still standing. And so Our Time Has Come represents that and reflects that, and it was quite different. You know, I love history just as much as I love art, and I love chemistry and technology. And so when you talk about early on, when I was talking to the students, they were like, what influences you? Do you watch other art and artists? And certainly I do. And somewhere along the way, when I thought about the fence, you know, I thought about John Otterbridge. You know, I thought about Lovell, who pieces were in the Smithsonian African-American Museum that painted on wood. And I incorporated that into my messaging, into my emotion, into my creativity. What kind of painter am I? I'm a caring painter. I'm an emotional painter. You know, I want to paint something that will impact, will say something, will cause you to think about it. You know, to make you want to do right and do good. You know, and make you feel good. You know, that's that. You know, our human importance in living is to feel good, is to do good, is to have value and share that worth with others. Just a little time that we have. Museums and educational institutions have it right. Those are two of our most sustainable institutions. Outside of our church, our cultural establishments, because it's about the care of communities, it's about the care of individuals, it's about the care of families. And when we get that right, we leave our legacy. We leave what is important for us all. You know, for our kids. You know, we should all be able to live happy, and we should be able to die happy. And you know, that's how I you know, I spend my day. I want to use every part of that second, that nanosecond, in planning and thinking and living with that kind of purpose. And I get joy in it. And I have a wonderful wife and family that have certainly given me the opportunity to dream and act on it. And you know, it's incredible. It's incredible to be able to live and see it. My mom is 83 years of age, and she still says, "Do you need to go get a job?" I said, "Ma, I got a real job." I says, Old Dominion University has hired me. You know, it's still my art. And so you know, but she has watched her son, you know, believe in himself from a very early age, and has supported me, and others have too throughout my my endeavors, my touching other folks. The Timpton family out of New Orleans that sponsored me very early in purchasing my art and saying, you know, young man, you're going to do wonderful things and great things. You know, my Uncle Tootie, who's deceased, who used to always say, "You're a bad artist." Now, this is when I was a kid. And I believed that when he would come and he would visit, and we sit on that front porch, and I would doodle and work the very best I could as an artist to copy, you know, out of Archie comic books and the Sunday comics. But I believed in myself. I put the work in. When I had the means and the time to self-educate, to take my trips to the French Quarters and ask the artists in the square in Jackson Square about the medium, what provoked them to paint. When I took the time to walk to Loyola Avenue, where the public library was at, and get into the World Book encyclopedias and Britannica, and take myself and remove myself from the lower Ninth Ward and read these rich stories of other cultures at an early age. When I was courageous enough to get to the museums and look at the cultural artifacts, and had a different kind of experience because I didn't see enough constructive images of myself. Those things shaped me early. They impacted me. And as I continue to grow in my purpose, with my passion, there are other things that I will attempt to do as I continue to learn my way. You know, I went back to school, you know, a few years back, got my master's in museum studies, so I can have an intimate understanding on the front and the back end of museums, how they work, how they're funded, and how they contribute in gaining the public trust and sharing information informally at your leisure and at your pace, and how the mergence of the informal methodology and formal methodology of educating, you know, when that academic and scholarly institution joins hand with that cultural institution and partner for the enlightenment and the sole purpose of building a better community. I am overjoyed and and flowing over with the possibility of a better future. Joining hands, working collectively together, not individually in a vacuum. And, you know, this is our challenge moving forward, you know, as an institution and as a community. There's the yin and yang, you know, we are responsible for each other. Listen, I'm gonna give myself the big head. I was a bad man, but that bad man didn't get there all by himself. That bad community helped me get there, you know, every step of the way. And so it's through the championship of others that we get there. Nobody gets there by themselves. And so, you know, I got to once again thank you guys so much for giving me this opportunity. I feel like a pastor, like I've done 3 sermons, you know, in church. And I don't know where all of this is going to go, but I will guarantee there's something bigger and better than what we've had today in this time that's going to come out of it. I'll make that wager when I win that lottery. And that lottery probably is multi-millions of dollars, that I know that something bigger and better is going to come out of this. And so thank you, guys. Thank you so much. We are in some incredulous times. No doubt about it. This pandemic has affected us globally. It has touched us. And I see the spirit of hope and faith that is pulling us through. So thank you so much.
So before we end, I do want you to talk about your future, which is working with the Virginia Correctional System through your art with equity and inclusion. And if you just share, because, you know, we also have a contract that we work with the Lapeer prison, but this may be something that we need to do with the Michigan prisons as well. So do you mind just sharing a little bit about your work and what you're doing leading that?
Yeah, so in the grand scheme of things with the scholar in residence, there are 3 major things that our focus was. Definitely community engagement, student engagement, and then the funding side, the appropriation of cultural programs, you know, in the academic sphere. What does that look like? And so, so with that, Dr. Sumter, Melvina Sumter, at Old Dominion University, reached out to those in the community for a call to action for scholar in residence and how we could effectively participate, partner, and collaborate. And so the Virginia Department of Corrections says, you know something, we want to. And so we are very much in the preliminary stages of creating the kind of program of engagement on cultural equity. You know, this filling this gap. And it's at the faculty level, which is close to about 13,000 employees that are engaged in that process. And we're putting together a curriculum with the arts to have this conversation, to have this discussion, to have the cultural sensitivity to everyone, so that we're able to, for those who are incarcerated, to help them reconstruct their lives in a manner that they can make the kind of contributions when they're outside of those correctional facilities, those prisons, that we see value, that there's no waste. You know, we got to be very careful in a state of capitalism, because the way things for me looks, you know, you're either an asset or you're a liability. That's what it looks like on the books of capitalism. And if you become a liability, then that's a throwaway. You know, you see no kind of value in that. That's not how it should work. We should see the importance in everything, particular people. That's where the work comes in at. That we extract what's constructive, what's contributory, will add value to that person's lives and to others. And we spend too much of an effort in incarceration. And we know historically African Americans and people of color are disproportionately incarcerated in penal institutions. And so I get an opportunity to go in and impact through my art, starting with the employees and members of that body, and then extending itself to that population that's incarcerated. And I look to do wonderful things in partnership. And so we have those folks in the training capacity looking at it, what I've offered already, what they see of value, and putting this project together that will make a considerable difference inside of that institution.
Well, thank you again. We'll be watching and seeing what we can garner from what you all learn and do. I just want to say it's been an incredible day learning about you and your artistry and the difference that you're making across the nation. I am so happy that you said yes, and I'm so happy that you are still the same person that I met probably about 20 years ago.
It's 20 years ago. Wow.
Yes, yeah, I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was. So we can't say enough of what you've given to our student body, our employees, and now our community. And I just want to say that I'm very grateful and hope that one day you will be able to come to Flint, maybe show your work in person, and that we actually get to work with you as partners on some big project that you may be going off into. We would love to be a part of it at Mott Community College.
Oh, thank you so much. I would love to have that opportunity. I mentioned earlier, as soon as COVID breaks, I'm going to come up there. We're gonna face to face. We're gonna have this wonderful opportunity to engage. To meet each other. We can have some brainstorming sessions. Would love to do that with the community artists that are there in Flint and throughout Michigan. Create some real partnerships, some sustainable programs that will impact. Integrate our young ones into that campaign. I'm a firm believer that it starts very early. I said earlier, my son handles all of my social media. My succession is to give him my business at some point. And I says, little Ted, I says, Dad is pivoting. I said, I'm gonna be working on more programming, more engagement, at the academic and administrative level. I need you to handle the social media and all the retail stuff. And I said, I have the playbook for that. I have a standard operating procedure on doing business on multiple levels. So that's a no-brainer. I'll give you that. But I do think there's a lot of room for artistic and cultural growth in partnership with our institutions throughout our communities. I am so glad I went back to school because Henry Leconte was a museologist in France, and he was a firm believer in these community museums, these eco-museums, these small museums that share the culture. They brought the artifacts in from the homes, and they had this little house in the neighborhood, and they would talk about these objects and artifacts and why they were important. And I think about, how do we build out those institutions on our academic campuses, and how do they effectively communicate with each other from one campus to the next campus? How we communicated from drum to drum, same kind of way, and leveraging technology to make that happen, and highlighting that documentary, Africa, Great Civilizations. Dr. Henry Louis Gates went back 200,000 years, and he showed the structure of society that was formulated on culture, on that level of civility. And so Maslow had it there at the apex of it all, that we put culture at the highest level. Some of our greatest thinking minds were sensitive and had a high propensity for the arts, for music, for dance, for culture. I mean, we can go into W. Du Bois and we can talk about the reconstruction of the image of the new Negro. We could talk about the Harlem Renaissance movement. We could talk about Greece and their impact on art and culture. And then you got to give it up to the Africans, you know, with language and codification and iconography. It's all there. DC is written with it on all the monuments and all the buildings. It's right there. Architect and art goes hand in hand. 14th century, Florence, Italy, the Medici, funding all of Europe. They were the bankers, had a high propensity for art and architect. Listen, when the Rhine was flooding, they didn't say save the people, they said save the art. That was recent.
That was true.
France's whole gross national product is on celebrating culture. It's right there. The largest museum system in the world is the Smithsonian. It's to say that you are important. So we have to have equity in that cultural space. When folks sit there to decide to write policy and law, it's culturally centered. They have something in common. If you're not at the table, if that's one of the guiding principles, you know, that you have to be at the table to write the policy and the law. If folks don't feel that you're important, you're not going to have that opportunity. So cultural equity is critically important. So no, I don't play around with art and the power of it and the magnitude of it. And so when you talk about that dollar bill is regulated, that dollar bill is not worth a dollar bill today. But that piece of art goes in value exponentially. You celebrate it, you institutionalize it. With any other product that you have, you create the value. And there's no other commodity out there that has so much richness and resource in it that creates value. It's art because it's personal. And we typically own it. We own it internally. And that's why we have it on our campuses. That's why we have it in museums. That's why corporations participate in the practice of supporting those institutions and funding those institutions. That's why major foundations fund the necessity of having cultural institutions there. The Ford Foundation, the Getty Foundation. I mean, it can go on and on. The Carnegie Foundation, the Mellon Foundation, the MacArthur Foundation, the Whitney Foundation. If you don't think that's important, you look at Sotheby's and Christie's when they have an auction and one painting goes for close to $500 million, $500 million, and ask yourself, who is in that room? And each one in that room have the potential to pull a trigger to buy that cultural artifact, that of significance and importance. So when Ted Ellis, when Dr. Beverly saw me years ago, I was coming and growing in that, saying that my culture and my history is important, painting that story and that narrative. So those 5,000 plus images was very intentional. That exhibition that I have at ODU was planned because I looked at Jacob Lawrence's commitment. I looked at Elizabeth Catlett's commitment. I looked at Samela Lewis' commitment. I looked at David Driscoll's commitment. I looked at John Otterbridge's commitment on preserving our culture and our heritage. Not only creating art, but building institutions. So when I look at the DeSable Museum, the oldest African-American museum in the country that Margaret Burroughs from St. Rose, Louisiana established. When I look at the Detroit Museum that houses our artifacts, when I look at the challenges of institutions of color that's unfunded. The first federally funded museum in the United States is the Anacostia Museum. That's on the east side of Washington, D.C. And it was deliberate and it was intentional. But that was the model of inclusion on how we could share the importance of our culture in our communities. Subsequently, years later, the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture was established. That Lonnie Bunch, who serves on the 400 Commission, along with Dr. Rex Ellis, who's chairman of the 400 Commission. God has a funny way of putting you in the right place at the right time for all the right reasons. And so as we continue to do good and do well and work toward excellence, You will be that instrument that others will gravitate toward and give you opportunity. 30-something years, I've witnessed this. As a little old kid from the lower ninth ward who had an idea that he wanted to do his art, who parents said, "You the first one to go to college. You can't be an artist. You better do something else because you're too smart." And so I said, okay, well, chemistry is hard. I'm gonna be a chemist. So I did that for 8 years, but my calling and my passion, Dale, has been art. And I was gonna find a way. I was gonna make a way. I was determined. And when others laughed and they thought fun of me and they said, "Oh my goodness, he driving up and down the country in this white van showcasing his art, you know, making a living." But I took care of my family, Dr. Beverly. They didn't miss a beat. You know, we had a chance to go to Paris, France, where my little 12-year-old daughter was speaking fluently to the Parisians there. And they opened up arms and took us on special trips throughout Paris, France. When we went to Versailles and we saw those dark-skinned Africans coming through that mist, you know, shaking these little keychains, you know, of the Eiffel Tower. And my son was like looking how tall they were and had a chance to see and talk to them and feel their garment. And then had a chance to go to Morocco years later and travel and go to China. You know, being adventurous, learning about other cultures, daring to dream. And so how many other kids can we touch? Can we share our passion with purpose to get them where they need to go and watch them move exponentially in that process? So yeah, I'm happy. I could do another round of this. If it's ready for tomorrow, then so be it. Let's do it. But you know, I gotta say, I have a new family and I have new friends. And I'm just, Dr. Beverly, I'm so thankful you made that phone call and you saw enough in me to open me up to your family at Mott Community College. Thank you so much.
Certainly, certainly. And so I do want to thank as well Michael Simon and Jeffrey McHale for that beautiful intro that we had earlier of the first. They did an awesome job of putting that together, and I hope that we will continue to see that for years and years and have it added as we have more firsts to come in. I also appreciate our students who are here today, Jacinta Green and Kelly Rosenkratz. Jacinta gave us a wonderful introduction and Kelly is going to send us out with an awesome conclusion. And so I just think it's been just one exciting day of learning that we could not have known how much we were going to get out of this. So thank you again, Mr. Ellis. And like I said, we look forward to having you on our campus. And I'm going to now turn it over to Kelly Rosenkratz to conclude us for the night.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Kelly Rosenkratz. I'm a graphic design major at Mott Community College. I feel very honored to have been given this opportunity tonight to be a part of such an amazing event. To hear Mr. Ellis speak about his art and the passion behind it and what he has accomplished was extraordinary for me. Listening to his history and journey as an artist and the impact of his artwork throughout the past 30 years was so very moving. His art is sharing a very intentional and emotional message, showing us the importance of the journey of African Americans for hundreds of years. He has great passion and integrity for his environment, his community, and heritage. He is so impressive in his honesty and authenticity about African American culture, and it shows in the fact that his artwork is beautiful and purposeful. I can't think of a better way to conclude Black History Month and to demonstrate our college's ongoing commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. On behalf of Mott Community College, thank you to Mr. Ellis for his willingness to spend this evening with the college and the broader community. We really appreciate him for sharing his art and his passion for the African American experience in the United States, past, present, and future. I also want to thank MCC's president, Dr. Beverly Walker-Graffia, for securing Mr. Ellis as a speaker for the college and for playing an important role in tonight's program as Q&A facilitator. Thank you also to MCC's Media Services Department for the extensive behind-the-scenes support they have provided for this broadcast, and to the staff within the Office of the President, Michael Simon and Deandra Larkin, for their assistance in putting this program together. Lastly, thank you to the Ballinger Trust at Mott Community College for helping to underwrite the cost of Mr. Ellis's appearances today at Mott Community College. We hope you enjoyed your time with us. Please be safe and stay well. Good night.